This is 40K Today. This is to podcasting what the Leviathan was to Brohammer at the LVO. We're just waiting to be nerfed.
Hey everybody, welcome to 40K Today. My name is Paul Murphy, your host. It is Friday, July 31st. Where is the year going? On this episode, we've got a killer coaching tip from Alex Macdougall and a best Coast Pairing spotlights talking about new tech coming down the pipe. It's Friday, we're feeling good, and we're here to slingshot you into the weekend. But first, let's check out the results from this week's poll. On our Facebook page, we asked, from the Indominus box set, which faction are you most excited about? This box set came stocked full with Necrons and Space Marines, new models for each faction. It was pretty close, but the results in, more people were excited about the Space Marines. 60% of you said you're more excited about the Space Marines, and I can't blame you. Those figures are amazing. The Outriders are going to be absolutely dominant on the tabletop. Every week we publish a poll like this on the 40K Today Facebook page. Please go and let your voice be heard. Are you ready to tune up your tabletop? Let's spend a few minutes with Alex Macdougall and see what he has to say.
Alex Macdougall, welcome back to the show. We're so excited to have you. As an Art of War coach, you're used to helping people out with getting adjusted to 9th edition. And we thought today we'd have a coaching tip and just like a quick tip for somebody who wants to get a little better at the game. What would you give them as their tip this week?
My biggest tip would be to learn to build your armies to win on the primaries. I think the secondaries are important, but most games will be won and lost on the primaries. I think really focusing on mobile, objective secured troops are a great way to take points away from your opponent.
Interesting. So you think that, like, because I've heard a lot of players sort of offhand say, well, now tanks shoot into combat, and with the new attachments, you don't need to take as many troops because you get your CPs without having, before you'd have to be like double battalion to get your CPs or more, triple battalion, right? And now you start with your CPs, so I don't need as much objective secured. And you're saying people should start thinking about like how important it is to win on those objectives?
Yeah, I don't think we need to quite have the troop presence that we used to. Like, a lot of armies were running 180 boys and grots and massive 120 man units or groupings of termagants and stuff. And maybe that's not the way forward, but we can't just ignore the fact that you can put a tank on an objective, but unless it fills the entire space of the objective, you don't have to get into combat with it. If you can just run a single trooper onto that objective is yours now.
Yeah. I mean, and even if you do get into combat with it, like, that's not the end of the world. Sure, on the following turn, your opponent is going to shoot whatever it is off the board. But at that point, you don't care because you've already denied them. Because the way scoring works, right? Scoring works at the beginning of your turn on the primaries. So let's say your opponent, they just finished their turn. It's now your turn, and they're standing on 4 objectives. If you just run one objective secured model on all 4 of the objectives that he's on, and he doesn't have any objectives secured, you just made him score 0 on primary without firing a shot or swinging an axe. Like,
it also controls where they shoot next turn.
Right.
They may want to put firepower into specific things, but they now have to shoot at let's hope, like the trash that you've thrown onto the objectives.
Yeah, so cheap objective secured bodies that move or get there, I think is certainly something worth considering. Other things that I've thought about, and I don't know if this is good or not, but there are certain things that sort of increase your objective secured count. Like, for example, I think a Primaris Ancient, or maybe any Ancient, can get, I don't remember if it's a Warlord trait, but you can basically all of your objective secured models count as 2 instead of 1.
Yeah, and that's huge for Marines that are usually looking at a lower model count.
Yeah, absolutely.
Turning 5 intercessors into 10 means you've probably got that objective for sure.
Right, because you don't really outpunch intercessors in the troop v troop battle, right?
No, I think they are the benchmark of good troops.
Yeah, they are, and they're durable, but they're not numerous, so that can be a problem. Okay, so if we're thinking about playing on primary, so we talked about having some objective secured models. What other things would you consider to be important in list design?
Since if we're playing objective secured and we are looking to deny points, what else can we do to increase our mobility? If you are playing Guardsman, you have orders like move, 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 and you have Chimera to get you there. GSC has certain cult traits that can increase your advance rolls, which can actually make you quite quick. And of course, you can always deep strike to objectives or lying in wait and deep strike directly onto objectives 3 inches away from your opponent. Anything can get your troops to objectives in ways that your opponent might not have seen coming is going to be huge. Tyranids do that very well as well with Swarmlord and with Metabolic Overdrive, both of which can double your movement.
So what do you think about transports then in the new edition? Do you think people should be looking at those as a possible way to, number one, shield your troops for a turn, but also, move them forward on the board, shield them for a turn, then they can pop out and get to any objective they want?
Yeah, I think transports are fantastic. In a lot of situations, I think the cheaper the better, unless you have a historically very good transport like a Wave Serpent or more recently an Impulsor.
Yeah.
But yeah, Chimera and Taurox and even the humble Rhino, I think, are an excellent way to get your troops there, keep them safe for a turn, or even make it so that it's actually a negative to kill the Rhino. If the Rhino dies and suddenly 10 objective secure troops get out on it, you've actually made it harder for you to hold that objective.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, that's another reason for you to play objective secured, right? If your opponent puts a Rhino with some objective secured models in it, you can just surround the Rhino with your objective secured models, and then suddenly they can't get out.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to kill that Rhino. You own that objective, and it's not going anywhere. So this is sort of the play and counterplay when you're thinking about playing the primaries. Interesting. Okay. Last question. Do you think that having good firepower to maybe shoot people off of objectives is also something worth considering?
I think how you value your horde killing and your tank killing is very important. Some people will go, hordes are dead, vehicles are the meta, and they'll go nothing but very strong, high efficient firepower. And that might make it so that, some 10-man little trash guardsman squads on objectives are actually suddenly very frustrating to remove as you fire, las cannons and melta-guns into them to try and get rid of them. So balancing, the balance between the assault cannon and the las cannon is very important.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can't have just all eradicators. Like, as sexy as those things are and as cool as they are, they are not really good in a guardsman.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll make you feel really bad shooting that 6 melta-guns into 50 points.
All right, folks, you heard it here first. You should be thinking about mission, especially primaries, first and foremost when you're thinking about trying to win in 9th edition.
Thanks a lot, Alex. Always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Today's episode of 40K Today is brought to you by Frontline Gaming. Frontline Gaming is a one-stop shop for all your Warhammer hobby needs, discounted products, American-made gaming mats and terrain, and a full line of miniatures painting service and daily hobby content. And this can all be found at frontlinegaming.org.
In our next segment, we sit down with Paul McKelvey from Best Coast Pairings. I tell you, they've got a lot of new things coming down after their partnership with Down Under Pairings. Paul and Josh are bringing forward some absolutely cool things for us to enrich our gaming experience with.
Hey, Paul, welcome to the show. First, before we get started, let me thank you for being a major sponsor on our 9th edition celebration giveaway where you can win $1,500 in Games Workshop product. That promotion is going really well. But you're here to tell us about Best Coast Pairings, which for those of you living under a rock, I think most of you know what that is, but it's primarily used to help you find events to go to, right? But you guys have expanded the functionality of it recently?
Oh yeah, we've been putting in some pretty hard work here in the last couple months, but we got some really cool stuff that just dropped this 9th edition weekend, to be honest, which is the casual game reporter and the scorecard system. We've created a way so that people can keep track of games that aren't just tournament games, and it helps with a little complexity of the missions in 9th edition, but it gives you a nice little scorecard so you can go through on your mobile device or your desktop and record your scores and keep track of them and who you've played against. And we only have plans to expand from what we have already, and it's we want to put it in the hands of everyone that is going to be playing 9th edition, which hopefully is everyone listening to this podcast.
That's amazing. And out of curiosity, and I don't even know the answer to this question before I ask it, but Will the data that comes from that be made available to people to tease out and figure out like what's going on in the meta? Because I think that would be really cool information to have.
That's actually it's something that I personally am really excited to see, as I want to see what the results of casual games look like compared to tournament games once the flow of tournaments gets turned back on. I want to see what people are reporting is winning in their Garage Hammer meta versus what's winning in the competitive hardcore tournament scene.
Yeah, and then you'll also be able to track things like, because you said it's going to be a score reporter, so I assume that means that you're going to be able to track mission scores out of 9th edition. Is that right?
Yep, that's what it's. Well, we dial it back a little bit and say one of the things that we've done with the scorecard system that I'm really excited about doing is that it's able to adapt to anything. So even if the competitive seed decides to change and create their own tournament system, we can easily adapt the scorecards to work for anything. And what we're building towards is having a way so that the TO can actually create their own scorecards. Remember the days of custom missions where someone would have their own mission and they'd throw it in there and something kind of wonky or something like that. But they'll give the TOs the opportunity to have custom scorecards for their own tournaments that are easily programmable. And then we'll have them you can either publish them or have them hidden behind a private wall. So like if I want my Adepticon missions in there, I can load my Adepticon missions in there still. And if I want to have my own custom missions, I can load them in there. And I can either show them to everybody else or I can keep them just for my tournament. And it helps to keep the list of all the available scorecards there too. But kind of lets everyone have their own scorecards for their own missions, no matter what the mission is they want to play.
That's going to allow people to be really creative, right? Because I think a lot of people are going to adopt the Games Workshop missions, but I also know that a lot of events like to do fun stuff, right? I think we're going to see Crusade events, for example. I think that's going to be a big deal. So let me ask you this. All of this functionality is available in the Best Coast Pairings app now?
It is not all of everything I just talked about right there, but as far as the ability to actually have the scorecards, we've got a couple of scorecards loaded in there now. So we have 9th edition. You could do so you can do the standard 9th edition GT 2020 missions, or we actually have them. So if you want to dial it in a little bit more, you can do it turn by turn. And then we've also added in the Age of Sigmar General's Handbook missions in there too. So, but again, we're going to expand this functionality out to cover all the game systems we have in there. So it's going to go down to Kill Team, to Necromunda, all those Titanicus, all those custom scorecards you have for any mission for any game you have. You'll be able to have scorecards in there.
Will you also be able to track your progress? So like, for example, you said you could keep track of your casual games, right?
Mm-hmm.
Will you also be able to keep track of, like, say in Crusade, what units got what? Like, is that something in the future that might come down the pipe?
That's it's one of the things that there's a couple of us on the BCP team that didn't get the books because of shipping delays yet. But one of the things we plan to do is make it so it can support Crusade and make an easy way for people to track. Because that's one of the reasons why I've never done those type of missions myself, is because it's a pain. You have a piece of paper trying to keep track of things like that. But with this, you'll have a digital way of being able to track Crusade and what your models have done. It'll coincide with what we're going to do with some of the list stuff. But basically, you'll be able to add notes to a list on what you've done and attach that list to each different game you're playing.
That's amazing. So before we go, we like to leave the listeners with a reason to come listen to you talk about this cool stuff. So we're going to give them 5 entries into the contest for entering a keyword that you're going to give them right now. So why don't you give out a keyword, whatever you want, right? And then we'll let our listeners enter that into the contest, and they'll get 5 additional entries.
Let's do BCP player.
BCP player. Okay, that'll be the keyword. You guys heard it here first. And also, as a side note, if you install BCP through, because I can only do this through the Apple Store, unfortunately, for the contest, but if you install it, that will also be worth 5 entries. So no reason not to at least give it a spin, because you're going to get more chances to win those prizes. All right, Paul, thank you so much for your time, and we wish everyone the best of luck in that contest.
Thanks for having me.
Paul, you're doing great work. Thanks a lot for taking the time with us. And before you know it, it's time for the model of the day.
It's the model of the day, the model of the day, the model of the day.
This model of the day comes from paint_and_giggles on Instagram, using that hashtag 40K today. We get to see a beautiful Inquisitor Crusader. This model is brilliant. This model has a lot about what we love about 40K. Over-the-top heraldry, an intimidating stance, flowing cloaks, got glowy effects on the power sword, the shield, the armor, you name it. There's an amazing amount of technique displayed here, going from metallics to non-metallics to shiny stuff to glowing stuff, and then making all the textures look different. This is exactly what you want to see. I cannot wait to see how this thing shapes up. Paint_and_giggles. Check them out on Instagram. You can get your model featured on this show by using that hashtag 40K today. That's how we find them to feature here. Thanks very much for posting those. Can't wait to see what you got. And there we go, going into the weekend. Do not forget to check out our Best of the Week episode. You can download that via the Frontline Gaming Network or where you get your podcast or up on the Forge the Narrative YouTube page. Check us out there as well. A huge thank you to Alex Painter, Tanya Gates, and Seamus Ronan for that work behind the scenes to pull all this show together, for their hard work every single week, every single day. We cannot say thank you enough. Also, thanks from John and Steve and myself, Paul Murphy. Check in tomorrow for the best of it, anything you might have missed. We'll see you next week.